I have seen a lot of discourse recently, especially with the most recent MCU film to come out in theaters. A lot of people have been debating, mostly arguing on what has been the best MCU films post Avengers Endgame. So that made me decide, fuck it. Let me make my own list. And coincidentally enough, there are exactly 10 Marvel films, 10 MCU movies that have come out since after Avengers Endgame. I am not going to include the Disney Plus shows. Maybe I will do a separate list on that at a later date. This is just the movies. Let's start with number 10. So, the lowest of the low, the bottom of the list, Thor Love and Thunder. Now, I will admit, the more that I've watched this movie, the more that I've thought about the film, I may be a little more sour on it. I tend to remember and focus on the things that this movie did wrong and just effed up. Like Christian Bale being the villain. Christian Bale is one of my favorite actors of all time. Marvel was able to get Batman to play a villain in one of their big tentpole films. And what do we get? We got a fairly generic, interesting backstory, don't get me wrong, but they just didn't do a lot with him. And even Christian Bale mentioned that a lot of his stuff was either cut out or just underwritten. And a lot of the stuff that was going on with Natalie Portman's character, Jane Foster, having cancer, just felt like it was sort of played up for comedy. And Valkyrie not maybe getting enough screen time. Thor being an absolute idiot by this point. Taika went way too far with the comedy. At number 9, Eternals. I know some people hate Eternals, like they don't like it at all. They just have no good things to say about it. I feel like the backstory stuff, the lore that this movie single-handedly creates for the MCU, as far as the creation of humans, the creation of just any type of objects, the Celestials, all of the things that they get into. Some of these characters are interesting. Maybe there's too many characters. Maybe that's why it feels overwhelming. Maybe that's why it feels like it's hard to connect to all of them because there are so many. Maybe 5 years down the line, we will look back on Eternals and say, oh, wow, this ends up setting up a lot of stuff that ended up being more important much later on. Number 8, Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, one of the more recent movies that has come out. And I know I remember seeing a lot of negativity from critics and some fans. This movie people cite a lot as far as saying, see, the MCU has lost its touch. The MCU doesn't have the magic anymore. And I will admit that I don't love all of the humor in this movie. I think a lot of the humor feels a bit forced. I do like the premise, though, of all of our main characters getting trapped in the quantum realm, especially given how much we've been talking about the quantum realm. Michelle Pfeiffer gets a lot more to do, which is something that I wanted to see, definitely, especially after her casting. And Jonathan Majors, I don't know what the future of Jonathan Majors is in the MCU, but the fact that we got him as Kang for at least this movie, and I think he gives a great performance, very menacing, very intense. Number 7, Black Widow. I think Black Widow suffers the most from the timing of when this film came out. I have been wanting a Black Widow solo movie for the longest time, and I can't believe that we got it after her character was already dead. Her character dies in Avengers Endgame, and so you could argue that this movie coming out being a prequel, it sort of negates interest in that. Also, it was the first MCU movie to come out during the pandemic, and so not a lot of people wanted to see this as well. And that's unfortunate. I do think that there's some cool stuff in here, especially pertaining to Black Widow, Natasha Romanoff's backstory, and some of the stuff that she went through with her sister. But Taskmaster, I do admit that they dropped the ball a little bit with Taskmaster. Number 6, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. A lot of people are mostly upset for this movie for two reasons. One, With a title called The Multiverse of Madness, people expected more. They expected bigger, they expected crazier. And maybe it's because it also came after Spider-Man No Way Home that they just thought it would match that level of crazy multiverse shenanigans. And I don't really know what I personally expected because I wasn't disappointed myself when it comes to multiverse stuff. I did think that they did some crazy stuff, especially with the Illuminati. People were disappointed maybe with that as well, but I was enjoying that. I was into that. Wanda was the big issue, I think, where Wanda is a beloved character, a huge favorite amongst the fans, and especially after WandaVision, it's like we came to love her on such a deeper emotional level. And the very next time we see her, she's a villain. And you almost feel like you didn't get that gradual transition of now she's evil. Now she's willing to kill innocent people in order to get her children back, in order to do what she wants. You have to admit, though, they took some fucking swings. They went all out with the horror. Sam Raimi having a zombie Doctor Strange, I'll always give it a couple extra points just for that alone. Number 5, the top 5, I have Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. I really enjoyed the ambitions of this film, the fact that we leaned into the culture of the Shang-Chi character, his father especially being the Mandarin. This character I thought was done so dirty in Iron Man 3. I was so glad that they brought him back, or they tried to make it right when it came to me and the fans who did not like that. I did think that maybe the end got a little too over the top with the dragons and the big epic CGI battles that Marvel loves to do. I more enjoyed the martial arts, the kung fu. Those levels of action and fight scenes I thought was where this movie stood out the best. At number 4, Black Panther Wakanda Forever. I fully believe that if Chadwick Boseman was in this film, it would probably be even higher on my list, because I think as it stands right now, the movie is tremendous as far as a tribute to Chadwick Boseman, as far as a tribute to the character of T'Challa. I think it does a great job of paying tribute and paying respects to all of that. But also, I didn't know going into this movie if I could buy Shuri stepping into this role, becoming the new main character, but I did buy it. Letitia Wright did do a great job. And I also think that the villain, Namor, such a great job of making him feel fully realized and fully relatable, letting you understand where he was coming from. And the action and whatnot, it's all great. Number 3, Spider-Man Far From Home. Some people forget that Far From Home came out after Avengers Endgame. It's technically still a part of Phase 3, so maybe that's why people don't really think about it. And it also came out 2 months after Avengers Endgame. But it's dealing with the aftermath of everything that happened there. It's dealing with the aftermath of Tony Stark's death that Peter especially has to deal with. I like taking Spider-Man outside of the country on vacation, seeing him in new locations, seeing Peter and Michelle's relationship start to develop here was also great. Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio is a big standout as well, and also that ending cliffhanger. Him revealing Peter Parker's identity as Spider-Man was such a huge shock to me. I think that alone makes this movie as notable as it is. Number 2, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. This is very recent when it comes to releases, and I can't get enough thinking about this film, thinking about how well James Gunn in his last Marvel movie was able to wrap up so many story arcs and so many characters that he himself brought to the screen so many years ago, and how we feel like we know these Guardians characters, lived with these Guardians characters, and it gets so wacky and gets so crazy with some of the alien species and some of the alien stuff going on, but what works is how relatable, how human a lot of the interactions and relationships feel like. Rocket Raccoon, a goddamn raccoon, is my favorite character of this group, and that says a lot for the writing, says a lot for the acting. The villain, the higher evolutionary, my God, was this guy evil. And it's refreshing to get an evil villain, because usually, or especially lately, Marvel has had the villains that have been relatable, that have been likable, that have been people that maybe you even want to see get redeemed. Where this guy, no, was bad, and you wanted to see him get his comeuppance for my number one favorite MCU movie after Avengers Endgame. You probably guessed it by now. Spider-Man No Way Home. I love this film. I have rewatched this movie countless times since it's been out, and I never get sick of it. I never get bored. I love how somehow they did it. Somehow they made an end of a trilogy for the Tom Holland films. I'm sure we'll get more. But it not only felt like a Tom Holland movie, it felt like a Tom Holland Peter Parker story, but we also were able to do the nostalgic thing of bringing back Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, something I never thought I'd see in my lifetime, bringing back Andrew Garfield and also making me appreciate Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man way more than I ever have before. I have since gone back to rewatch his movies, and I get so much more out of especially his acting, especially his arc. Everything that Tom Holland's character goes through with Aunt May and promise that he makes at the end and just the sacrifice that he makes at the end. It's so gut-wrenching, but it feels so Spider-Man. Bringing back the original villains, bringing back Dr. Octopus, Lizard, Sandman, but Green Goblin, Willem Dafoe had to come back from a different universe just to retain his crown as one of the best Marvel villains, the best portrayals of a Marvel character of all time. I think people woke up to what kind of a badass evil motherfucker the Green Goblin can be. So guys, let me know in the comments below what do you think of not only my list, but what are your 10 best MCU movies after Avengers Endgame. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. Later.